Hello and welcome to the Narrow Gauge Railway Museum in Talyllyn. This year, 2021, we are celebrating the centenary of Talyllyn Railway locomotive number 4, Edward Thomas, built originally in 1921 for the Kerr Railway, just over the valley. It was built by Kerr Stuart and it's their works number 4047. So we've got a display here about that, about the engine, about its life on the Kerr Railway, with a picture taken in 1925, so a lovely period piece, and how the Kerr Railway ceased operating in 1948, and the two remaining locomotives, number 3 and number 4, were stored round the back of Mahuntliff station, and the station master at Mahuntliff was very careful to keep them out of sight of all the high officers who wanted to scrap all the redundant equipment from the Kerr Railway. So they were sheeted over at Mahuntliff for a couple of years, and when the Talyllyn Railway Preservation Society was formed in 1950, the opportunity was taken to acquire those two engines for use on the Talyllyn Railway. So of course number 4 has operated on the Talyllyn for 70 years, just 30 years on on the original Kerr Railway. So it came from Kerr on the 17th of March 1951, and there's some pictures here that show it coming to Talyllyn. There's then an account taken from John Bates' book Chronicles of Pendray Siding that talk about its first run on the Talyllyn Railway, which wasn't a total success, shall we say, but it's an interesting story told by John, with a picture of its second run on the railway in 1952. So it's been here for 70 years. It has had a Giesel ejector for about 10 years, 1958, 1968, and we have the equipment here in the museum, currently beside the display here. Over the years, the engine has carried a large number of liveries. In 1985, for example, it was given a Great Western livery, the Kerr Railway having been taken over by the Great Western, although there's no evidence that the engine ever carried anything like a Great Western livery. It has masqueraded as Peter Sam from the Reverend Audrey's stories on a number of occasions. It has been painted in a semblance of Kerr Railway livery, although again not too sure how accurate that is or what exactly that was. There is some thought that they just used Great Western Road Vehicle brown paint for it. It has been in BR black. Again, it never carried that livery, but certainly was for a photo charter and so on. One of the interesting exhibits we have been loaned for this exhibition is the ABC of Locomotives of the Minor British Railways. Some wonderful things, examples, narrow gauge and standard gauge, from the Ashover Light Railway to the Cheshire Lines Committee, from the Isle of Man Railway to the Ravensglass to the Shropshire and Montgomeryshire. So Colonel Stevens had a hand in some of them. The Festiniog is in here, the Talyllyn is in here, but there's a page of the ex-Great Western or the Great Western Railway. This book was published in 1945, so it's got the ex-Kerr Railway engines, the ex-Vale of Rydal engines, and the ex-Welshport and Llanfair Railway. So that's a lovely exhibit we have been loaned for the purpose of this exhibition, and that's featured here. The other thing to draw your attention to is that the original maker's plate was Great Westernised at some point in its career, probably at Mahuntliff Shed, we're not certain about that. But the original works number 4047 was erased and a number 4 was brazed onto the plate in its place, and that's the plate it had on when it came to towing. But over here we tell the story how for its 60th anniversary, so 40 years ago now, a replica plate was made of the original. It's photographed there. It's carried on the engine today. It was unveiled here by Pat Garland and Bill Faulkner, and there's photos of that ceremony. So the original one, Swindonised, is there. The replica is on the engine, so you'll have to see that as it goes past. And this other nameplate here is one that was cast for its Great Western livery and British Rail livery and various other incarnations it's had. So that's a modern addition to the story. The other part of the display we've created this year tells the story of Kerr Stuart and Company Limited. That's the manufacturer that built locomotive number 4, Edward Thomas. So there's some history of the company. There's an illustration of a beautiful share certificate and a wonderful character portrait of the chap who that share certificate was issued to. There's then a version of the story about the demise of Kerr Stuart and Company, as told by Tom Rolt in his book Landscapes with Machines. There's some doubt as to how much truth and how much fiction is in that narrative, but it's a good story. But after the company closed, the goodwill was taken over by Hunslet, who continued to build Kerr Stuart locomotives right up until 1971. This is tank reel number 4, which was the last Kerr Stuart designed engine built by Hunslet, as I say, in 1971, and went out for service in Java, now back in this country and preserved. But I've mentioned Tom Rolt. This year we're also marking 70 years of the Talyllyn Railway Preservation Society operating the Talyllyn Railway. Tom Rolt was instrumental in the founding of that society, but years before that he was an apprentice at Kerr Stuart. So from his autobiography we've included some extracts from his autobiography about his apprenticeship, quoted with kind permission of Tim Rolt, his son, with some illustrations of some of the exhibitions they took the locomotives to. There is a standard gauge one that's crept in there, but it's interesting nonetheless because it was employed on the Ravensglass and Eskdale Railway for hauling the stone into Ravensglass, with this beautiful picture of the point where the standard gauge and narrow gauge track intersected. But during his apprenticeship, Tom Rolt was quite heavily involved in road vehicles as well. So there's some features on the road vehicles. Kerr Stuart were notable in having a number of standard designs for their locomotives. One of the exhibits we have is a reprint of the 1924 catalogue of Kerr Stuart locomotives, and we're going to have it open at this page, which lists all of the classes, all of the key dimensions, all of the haulage capacity and so on of each of the standard designs they had. So that's in the exhibition. And just here there's a couple of sheets showing some of the more well-known and a random sample of their products. Just dipping the toe in the water really, because there were so many, but a lot of the well-known examples that are still around we've listed here just for convenience and completeness. So we go on then to feature the various standard designs. The Joffrey class, there's several of those around on the West Lancashire Railway, on the Linton and Barnstable Railway and others. A derivative of that was the Hague class. This is Sergeant Murphy, which is now on the Tybee Valley Railway. Perhaps the most famous of their class is the small Wren class. And again, we just feature one example of that, but there are so many. But this is Roger, currently at Statfold Barn, a lovely little engine. And then we come to the tattoo class. Edward Thomas was a tattoo class engine. You can see a lot of the similarities. The other well-known surviving tattoo is Stanhope. So again, that's featured here and in this display. We then come on to the Sidar class, and the most well-known probably example surviving is Diana, featured here. That ran initially at Kerry in Mid Wales on forestry work, later at Penny-Orsaf Quarry, and is now preserved, currently resident at Amerton in Staffordshire. The next item we feature is Kerr Stuart Works number 4415. I don't think it ever had another name or number, but it was a pioneer diesel locomotive, and it was trialled on the Welsh Highland Railway at Dinas Junction, later at Minforth on the Festiniog Railway. They couldn't afford to buy it, so it went back to the manufacturer after the trial, but I think it was probably regarded as a success. As part of the promoting the diesel traction, they produced this book, 15 Shillings Change. And the marketing strategy was that if you spend £1 on coal and everything you need for a steam engine, and then you buy a diesel engine, you'll only spend 5 shillings and you'll end up with 15 shillings still in your pocket as change. But this is quite a technical book about the transmissions, the gearboxes, the engine, and so on. So that's their marketing blurb for the diesel locomotive, and trying to convince you it's so much better than a steam engine. I leave you to decide. The final examples, the very top one is an interesting one. It's Kerr Stuart number 721. It's actually part of this museum's own collection, built for the Dundee Gasworks. A very small engine because it had to go round the gasworks and under the various retort houses and all the rest of it. But that's now at Beamish, and we're hoping with their assistance that will be restored to operating condition. So watch this space for 721 Dundee Gasworks. We profile a few others here. Dromad, currently out of ticket with its boiler, but it's basically resident on the Cavan and Leitrim Railway in Ireland. Couple of engines here on the Whipsnade Railway, and then Joan, a well-known engine on the Welshpool and Llanfair Railway. So, as you can see, they've built an awful lot of engines, quite a few well-known ones, quite a few still around for people to go and see. But of course our favourite is Edward Thomas, and that's the centenary we are celebrating this year. So thank you very much for watching.